everybody. Today is April 6, 2025, and we have a special guest back on the show, Laith Marouf. Laith joins us from Lebanon and is an award-winning journalist and political commentator who's been working in media since 1999. Laith is also one of the creators and producers of the volunteer TV station and news outlet, Free Palestine TV, which can be found on all social media platforms and via freepalestine.video. Free Palestine TV not only has the best analysis of what's going on in Palestine and West Asia of any English language news outlet, but they're one of the best sources of news directly from the front lines. And Free Palestine TV publishes several videos per day from the front lines of Palestine, including the West Bank and Lebanon. Due to the fact that it's so difficult to get reliable and accurate news from the mainstream media in the West, we are very grateful to have Laith join us on the Activist News Network for a weekly news update on Palestinian resistance to Israel's occupation and genocidal campaign against Palestine. Laith, thank you for coming back and welcome to the Activist News Network.
Good to be with you, Chris.
So our first question is in regards to Palestine and in Gaza in particular. Since March 18th, Israeli forces have escalated bombardment from the air, land, and sea across the Gaza Strip and expanded several ground operations, resulting in thousands of casualties, destruction of civilian infrastructure, and large-scale displacement. It's been an endless loop of blood, and over 280,000 people are estimated to have been displaced in the last 2 weeks, including about 100,000 people from Rafah over the past several days. Laith, what are you hearing about these reports and in general from Gaza this past week?
Well, the situation is back to full genocide. As we see, the average is around 100 civilians being killed, martyred a day, many of them being children and women, and people are out in the open. There's no more structures to hide in, and they're being targeted in their tents. We've also, of course, seen the few places that's still standing, like UN, UNRWA schools, or a few of the Red Cross, Red Crescent structures also being targeted. We saw those awful images of bodies flying up in the air as they're being targeted in these tents by huge explosives. And of course, everybody's been talking about the deliberate massacre of Red Cross, Red Crescent paramedics and the burial of those killed by the Israeli soldiers in a mass grave with the ambulance with them. The level of the depravity that the Zionists have reached is, I think, unimaginable. I don't think anyone has ever thought that this will be a normal occurrence in human history, when a massacre of paramedics in a mass grave of those massacred with the ambulance being buried with them. This shows you how much they don't care anymore, the Zionists, about propaganda or the opinions of the world, because of the never ever changing position of the Western governments of full support financially and militarily for the Zionist calling, no matter what it does. So we see, since the project of Trump for mass transfer, expulsion, ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from Gaza didn't work, this is what we see right now, a return to the only other alternative the Zionists have in order to maintain their Jewish supremacist majority in the territory between the river and the sea, which is genocide.
As a follow-up, The massacres of Palestinians continue, and this past Friday, April 4th, the Israeli occupation army announced the expansion of its ground operation in northern Gaza Strip, namely the Shajuya neighborhood, where its forces have operated several times before. The Israeli occupation army recently reoccupied the Netzarim axis, and it appears now they are working to create a new corridor splitting Gaza into three parts. Laith, what is your reaction to this news of the expansion of Israel's ground forces in Gaza?
Yeah, this new Netzarim B or Philadelphia B, I think, actually, axis that they're trying to create, as you said, will split actually the south of Gaza into two parts. And the occupation of the border with Egypt continues. The expansion, as you're saying, in the north in Shujaiya, but the resistance is still ongoing. There's on the ground and still firing missiles into the Zionist colonies. So if we calculate all of these facts that we have from 17 months, meaning number one, the Zionists have not been able to militarily defeat the resistance in Gaza. And number two is that their strategy as a military Zionist have not changed. So we then can only extrapolate that the Zionists know that they can't defeat the resistance, and therefore the only goal of their military activities is genocide. And that's what we see happening. The resistance continues, and the Israelis continue to target civilians, civilian infrastructure, and randomly killing whole families because that's their only goal and strategy.
We also wanted to ask you about a report this past Friday, April 5th, that an Israeli airstrike hit a building in the city of Sidon in southern Lebanon, killing a Hamas leader, Hassan Ahmed Farhat, or Abu Yasser, alongside his family. Laith, how significant is this news?
Well, it is significant in the sense that right now this is another indicator that in Lebanon we're back to full war also. So we've seen the Zionist attack Beirut and assassinate a Hezbollah member and his family, and now we've seen them do this assassination of a Hamas representative in Saida and killing his family also. And that means now all the major cities in Lebanon are back on the crosshairs of the Zionist genocidal actions. And therefore, anyone that thought. And another thing about this assassination, specifically of this Hamas leader, is that this has nothing to do with the supposed ceasefire conditions, which is that Hezbollah withdraws from the south of the Litani River, which has been concluded according to the UNIFIL, according to the United Nations and the observers. And therefore, this targeting of a Hamas representative has nothing to do with that. Therefore, again, this is a indication that there is no conditions that will satisfy the Zionists to stop them from targeting at will Lebanon if Lebanon is not responding to these attacks. And now the situation, especially with the past week attacks on Saida and on Beirut, we are, I think, going to see some response coming very, very soon from the resistance in Lebanon because the government and the military of Lebanon have been unable to extract anything from the Americans or the French that guaranteed this ceasefire. And therefore, any delay or patience that the resistance had or the population as a whole had is gone now. And if the resistance responds, it will have the full support of the majority of the population behind it.
Excuse me. Yesterday, Saturday, April 5th, it was reported that there were tens of thousands of people and over 1,300 hands-off rallies of varying sizes that took place across the country in the U.S. As the Trump administration escalates its crackdown on pro-Palestine student activism, and Israel continues the genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, the protesters are demanding hands-off. Of course, yesterday's protests were not just focused on pro-Palestine students and the genocide against Palestinians, but also on Trump. Nonetheless, we wanted to hear your response, Laith, to yesterday's protests across the U.S.
I mean, honestly, it's 17 months of genocide, and these protests, I don't think were any different than the protests that happened in the 17 months before, neither in the number of events and or the number of people that were out there, nor in their strategy of radicalism or not, or actions that this demonstration was doing. So why should I be expecting any different outcome? And given the seriousness of the situation in the universities, because according to just a few threads that are out there on social media, just the numbers from the major universities across the country is a couple of hundred students that have been already either deported, self-deported, and or are in custody in ICE. And so clearly the overall number in the country is much bigger than that. What happens to all the little colleges and little smaller universities and community colleges and others that people are enrolled in across the US that nobody's even noticing what's happening in those places. And so to have this crisis happening in the universities of the United States, I think, which is unprecedented. This didn't happen even during the Vietnam War era or the Red Scare, communist Red Scare, McCarthyist era. This scale of repression and destruction of academic freedoms and freedoms of speech. And so this response from the populace that are guided, it seems, by the traditional organizations that have failed to stop any of the genocidal actions and war crimes of the United States over the last 30 years, I think is, in my opinion, irrelevant. Currently, I want to say this, there's two constituencies that we're talking to here, or three constituencies, about what are the responsibilities and what should be the direction of radical revolutionary movement in the United States or Europe or the West in general. One are the Jewish citizens of those countries. And I think I start with them because currently the genocide, the Holocaust in Gaza, I think it's even bigger than a Holocaust was happening, is being conducted in their name. Whether they agree with it or not is irrelevant. It is being conducted in their name. Whether Zionism is a tool of imperialism or not, it is being conducted in their name. Okay, so they have the primary responsibility because children in Gaza are being burnt alive in their name. Whether the imperialists hate Jews or not, they are manipulating Zionism to achieve imperialist goals or not, those are irrelevant. Okay. So they have the primary responsibility right now because not only the Holocaust in Gaza is conducted in their name, the repression of all the Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim communities in the West is being conducted in their name. The deportation of these students, the disappearance of these students, the nabbing of these students is being conducted in their name. Okay. So what are they supposed to be doing? Nobody else can take on directly in a fight the Zionists that are Jewish, that are leading this genocide. During the Holocaust, there was 70,000 Germans that carried arms and died fighting the Nazis. There was Germans, Christian and secular, that attempted to assassinate Hitler. Today, we don't have one anti-Zionist Jew on this planet that is carrying arms against Zionism and the Holocaust conducted by the Zionists, nor any of them trying to kill or assassinate Netanyahu. And I don't need to, of course, say to people that they should do these things, because I understand. We can give you a cop-out as a Jewish Westerner whose the Holocaust has been conducted in their name, if you don't want to carry arms. You have a lot of other things that you can do. Meaning, and if you don't care about saving Palestinians or to die trying to save Palestinians as a Jewish European, Jewish American, then how about you think about saving Judaism? You see, that's another thing. We hear a lot of people worry in the Jewish progressive anti-Zionist circles about anti-Jewishness out there. Well, and they all say that Zionism is the number one cause of anti-Jewish sentiments around the world. Okay. Well, if anti-Zionist Jewish activists are truly concerned about Judaism, it is their duty to save it from Zionism. And if they're not willing to die for saving and liberating Judaism from Zionism, they themselves are condemning Judaism. Because for us who are not Jewish, whether I'm Palestinian or Westerner or whatever it is that I'm not Jewish, I have no care to save Judaism. It's not my fight. To save Judaism from the misrepute, the disrepute of Zionism and its crimes. So our friends, these in IGV, Independent Jewish Voices and Jewish Voices for Peace and what have you, if they're not willing to risk their life to save Judaism, let alone save Palestinians from Zionism, they don't have a right to complain when everybody then takes it that Judaism is Zionism and the crimes of Zionism fall on the feet of all Jews. This is a warning for these anti-Zionist Jews to awaken from their stupid, stupid behavior. This is not a social media battle or a demonstration battle. There is a genocide conducted in your name, and the result of this genocide, the final result, is not going to be the death of Palestinians, the end of Palestinians. It's going to be the end of Judaism and its credibility and its reputation for eternity if Jewish anti-Zionists don't take their responsibility correctly. The mainstream American public, again, this is a Holocaust conducted with their weapons, with their finances, with the support of the empire. And again, we don't see anyone taking this battle seriously. It is not, for me, I know I watch all these commentators, like, without mentioning their names, talking about America and saving America from these deep state and cabals and so forth. As a person living this genocide here and the destruction of the whole region, I have no interest in saving America. I have interest in stopping this genocide. And until these activists prioritize ending this genocide over their idea of saving the society of the United States or structures of its state, they will not be able to successfully do make any change in the direction of their society. There is contradictions, and that contradiction is this electoral politics that people think somehow the fact that they didn't work 100 years, somehow they're going to work now. And finally, the Arabic and Muslim communities, the Palestinian Arabic and Muslim communities in the West, they have to understand that what's coming is even worse. Because if we take the record of these movements, the failures over the last 17 months, to prepare for what I have been telling them is coming, what Trump is doing right now, I said it's going to happen a year and a half ago. What do you think is going to happen if mass incarceration of Arabs and Muslims commences now in the United States? If up until now, these activist movements in the US didn't bat an eye to help those who are right now been nabbed, a few hundred, maybe a few thousand that are now disappeared and nabbed. Do I put any trust as a Palestinian Arab or Muslim American in that the civil society is going to save me if mass incarceration and mass deportations and denaturalizations, which are just coming, they're going to strip citizenship from people? Okay. Do I expect any mass movement to help me in the US? I don't think so. So the Arabic and Muslim communities in the United States have to prepare for the worst that's coming. And that should include their rights that are guaranteed under the Constitution to carry arms and to form militias and to protect themselves. Because what's coming, what's normalized now in Gaza, what's normalized in Syria, what's normalized in Yemen, what's normalized in Lebanon by the empire, is going to be normalized on Arabs and Muslims in the United States. I went on a rant there.
We appreciate it, and I think it was necessary to hear all of those things, speaking on behalf of our audience and then as one of the constituencies you were speaking to. So thank you. We appreciate that. Before we move beyond Gaza is there anything we should know about Palestinian resistance factions from this past week that we haven't yet covered?
No, it's good.
So, moving on to Yemen, on Friday, April 4th, the New York Times reported that the U.S. has used $200 million in munitions since it restarted its campaign against Yemen over 2 weeks ago, the success of which has been, quote, limited. The New York Times goes on to explain that the total cost of the campaign could likely surge past $1 billion by next week, and the report comes as U.S. President Donald Trump has been boasting about the success of Washington's campaign against the Ansar Allah resistance movement, which he says has been, quote unquote, decimated. However, in closed briefings, Pentagon officials have acknowledged that there have been only limited success in destroying Ansar Allah and the Yemeni armed forces' vast, largely underground arsenal of missiles, drones, and launchers. And in fact, according to the New York Times, the Yemeni armed forces have managed to reinforce many of their military sites. Laith, what's your analysis of how successful the U.S. campaign against Yemen has been? And do you think this will deter Yemen's solidarity with Palestine and Palestinians?
Well, definitely the American campaign has been unsuccessful to deter the Yemeni resistance and military and or to damage its capabilities. And this is, as you mentioned in your brief there, as evidenced from American sources. But what the Americans have been doing is using their B-2 and B-52 bombers to target civilians. As we saw Emperor Trump sharing that, a video of a tribal gathering in a remote village in Yemen, and he was proud of killing these unarmed civilians. Casting on them the label that they are Houthis preparing for an attack on American targets. And so now, even the United States is bragging when it is committing war crimes, as its vassal, the Zionist colony, does now all the time. So we've reached this stage of the international law collapsing completely. And we're back to the rule of the jungle, and might makes right. And this is why this war is going to continue, because the US is unable to break the will of the people in Yemen. We saw the bombers, American bombers, target water supplies, electricity, schools, hospitals, factories, medicine factories. They're targeting everything that is of worth in terms of civilian infrastructure in Yemen, in hopes that they can, achieve the same goals that the Zionists have been trying to achieve, which is to subdue the Palestinians and Arab people and their resistance to Zionism in general for the last 100 years, and they're not going to achieve it. I tell you something even further than that. If the Israelis are able to genocide all the Palestinians inside historical Palestine, there will be still Palestinian resistance to them, because there's 14 million Palestinians outside in diaspora, and they will have to kill us all. And this is partially why we're seeing, the West act all these draconian laws and all those nabbings and expulsions that are happening in Germany and the US and other places, because they understand that as long as there's Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims around this world that have a hint of knowledge of history, they will resist them till the eternal end of time. Anyways, to go back to Yemen, the Yemeni forces continued to fire missiles after all those attacks. We saw the Yemenis attack the Harry Truman aircraft carrier group, including its destroyers and the frigates that are around it, and there is a high probability that Yemen will target American bases in Qatar, in Saudi, in the Emirates imminently. And that if more attacks come from these bases after the Yemeni retaliation, we may see Yemen targeting oil and gas facilities in the Gulf vassal states. So the continued escalation by the US in its flagrant targeting of civilians in Yemen to break the will of the Yemeni people is only going to drive us closer and closer to full disruption of the oil and gas markets as well as the global trade network, because Yemen is not backing down.
Thank you. And now about Lebanon. Lebanon is facing increased pressure from the U.S. in the form of an ultimatum to either disarm Hezbollah by force within a specified time period or face a renewed Israeli war against the country. U.S. envoy to the region, Morgan Ortagus, who praised Israel's war against the country, against Lebanon during a speech at the Lebanese presidential palace in February, is expected to visit Lebanon in the next day or two. This visit, quote, carries a U.S. message demanding the initiation of a plan to disarm Hezbollah as a condition for all other issues, from Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon to reconstruction. Laith, as someone living and reporting from Lebanon, what are you hearing about this news, and how do you think the Lebanese government will respond to these demands from the U.S.?
Well, I mean, the Lebanese government doesn't have much control or power to do these things that the U.S. is asking them to do. Ortegas arrived in Lebanon and she met with the officials here, including the Speaker of the House, leader of the Amal party, the Shia party that is in alliance with Hezbollah. And actually, this time, she hid the six-headed, six-pointed star that she wears on her neck and her necklace, although she's not Jewish. But she does that to show her support for the Zionist colony. But she hid it in front of the cameras, and she was caught trying to hide it. So it shows you that that she learned from her first visit here when she was wearing a ring with the six-pointed star on it as a way to taunt the Lebanese people. It's like walking into a Jewish neighborhood with a Nazi swastika ring and actually having the protection of your power behind you and nobody's trying to be able to stop you. This is the significance of wearing right now the six-pointed star in the world. It's just like wearing the the Nazi swastika. Well, it is the Jewish swastika basically. So the Americans and the Israelis can dream about achieving what wasn't achieved ever. So, and the Lebanese military doesn't have the power to deliver on what the Americans or the Israelis want. And in fact, if the president or prime minister orders the military to do such a thing, there will be a mutiny within the military, which is a majority of its soldiers are from the Shia community, and there will cease to be a Lebanese government. And although the local vassals, puppets of the U.S. in Lebanon, have been acting like as if Hezbollah is dead since the ceasefire, reality on the ground can't be much further than that. because Hezbollah has reorganized and rearmed, and its major caches are full again, and it's ready to engage in a full war. And if there is a war again in the region, in Lebanon specifically, it is 100% sure that it will spill immediately to inside Syria, and the Israeli troops inside Syria will become soft targets. I don't think the Israelis or the Americans can achieve this. And at this moment, if a war is reignited in Lebanon, it's going to become a wider war, even without anyone wanting it to be.
Thank you for that answer. We wanted to also ask you about Syria and Turkey. This past week, Israeli air forces carried out more strikes on Syrian air bases, including on an airfield in central Syria that Turkey had planned to take over. The attacks will make it harder for Ankara to deliver troops, air defenses, and other equipment in Syria. Laith, what are you hearing about these strikes, and how should we be analyzing all of this?
Well, there's a squabble between the Turks and the Israelis on the loot of Syria. And as you mentioned there, that the attack was on the T4 airport and base, just near Palmyra archaeological sites in the Homs province. And this is very important location geographically, and the Turks were trying to put air defenses and permanent base right there. The Israelis destroyed the air defenses and killed 4 engineers that were building the fortifications. And the Turkish government and military said nothing. They don't care, it seems like, about their soldiers and their engineers. But in general, you know, this came at the same time as the Israelis were bombarding Daraa in the south, because there was an armed uprising in Daraa against the Israeli occupation, and there was an ambush for an Israeli military convoy that the Israelis have now hid the number of casualties that they've sustained from that attack. And so this shows you how nobody has actual monopoly over the use of force in Syria. Not HTS, Wahhabi death squads, not the Turks, not the Israelis. And the fact that the situation is so fluid, and the fact that Turkey, Israel, and HTS, which are all vassals of the US, are fighting each other with the Kurds for control of as much of the loot as possible, this is making more space for the rise of indigenous resistance against all these foreign occupations. And as we see, it's been born now in Daraa already, you know, so this is very important. But one thing that I would say as a Syrian here is that nobody really understand how lawless the situation in Syria is. And I feel the fate of Syria and Syrian people and Syrian culture is less on the human scale than anyone else in the region currently. I remember when, you know, Iraq's archaeological sites were being looted or damaged by the Americans or the Wahhabi death squads like ISIS. The whole world was talking about it. Well, nobody's talking about any of the archaeological sites in Syria and what's happening to them. In fact, there is marauding, unidentified groups of, you know, bandits that are roaming the countryside of Syria with surveillance equipment, you know, and metal detectors and so forth, and are looting everything that they can find, and it's all being smuggled out of Syria. Nobody knows even what's happened to or nobody's asking even what happened to the museums of Syria. Forget that. Even on a religious level, maybe our viewers don't know, but the John the Baptist, or Prophet Yahya for the Muslims, the one who baptized Jesus Christ, his head was smuggled by the first Christians, if some of our viewers would know this, out of Jerusalem into Damascus, running away from the Roman rulers. And his head, the head of John the Baptist, who's Prophet Yahya for the Muslims, is in the middle of the Umayyad mosque in Damascus. And the head of Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, is also at the Umayyad mosque. We haven't heard the Pope ask what has happened to the head of John the Baptist and his tomb inside the Umayyad mosque. Did these Wahhabi death squads rip it and pull out his head and desecrate it? Not one Christian church in the world is asking that question. To me, it's a shocker. And that shows you how insignificant Syrian life is to the rest of the world currently. And of course, the killing continues unabated. The number of disappeared and killed in the 4 provinces in the west, Latakia, Tartus, Hama, and Homs, is now over 50,000. There is public ads that you can access on Telegram and others of slave markets in Idlib, of the kidnapped women and girls from the Shia, Alawi, and Christian sects that are in those 4 provinces. Nobody asked. I mean, people cared when this happened in Libya. Can you imagine? People don't care because it's a Syrian. So this is how I think how much the propaganda that over the last 15 years against Syria that the West, the Zionist, the imperialists managed, have been effective, to the point where even traditional leftist, women's rights, archaeological sites, Christianity, nobody wants to talk about it, because this is how worthless Syrian life is.
Laith, we also wanted to ask you about reports from April 3rd. The Russian Foreign Ministry warned that U.S. threats of attack against Iran are, quote, unacceptable and could result in a, quote, catastrophe. The Russian Foreign Ministry went on to say that, quote, the use of military force by Iran's opponents in the context of the settlement is illegal and unacceptable. Threats from outside to bomb Iran's nuclear infrastructure facilities will inevitably lead to an irreversible global catastrophe. These threats are simply unacceptable, end quote. Laith, what is your reaction to these statements by the Russian Foreign Ministry?
I mean, it's the least we should expect from Russia. Obviously, attacks on nuclear sites in Iran, even without using nuclear weapons, will lead to a nuclear catastrophe that will pollute the whole world, not only the region around Iran, and will, trigger attacks on nuclear sites in the Zionist colony, and that will add to the nuclear fallout in the whole region, and then things could snowball from that point on to the use of nuclear weapons. And who knows what Iran will do an attack on Iran is not an easy thing, and the Russians are right that this is illegal, the threats. But again, up until now, talking about legality, illegality, international law, human rights, ecology, animals' rights, none of that has stopped the Zionists and the imperialists from destroying huge swaths of nations and territories between Libya, Iraq, and Yemen over the last 20 years. And as we see over the last 17 months, the ongoing genocide in Gaza. So we're past that point of talking about legality and rights and peace and whatever it is. Russia needs to act on this issue. That includes delivery of weapons to Iran, positioning their military, what have you, stopping their talks with the Americans. Who knows? But it's more than just condemnations, because these condemnations will lead to nothing. Of course, we saw the joint exercises by the Russians, Chinese, and Iranians navies in the Gulf of Oman a few weeks ago. That's an indication of readiness of these navies and transfer of knowledge and expertise between them. Will Russia and China join Iran in a war between the Zionist empire and Iran? I'm not sure about that. Up until now, we can see how both Russia and China did not intervene militarily at all in the axis of resistance versus Zionist war over the last 17 months. So will the disruption of gas and oil deliveries affect China to a point that it thinks it needs to be involved in this war? I'm not sure, because Russia can supply China with as much oil and gas as it wants. So I think, the Iranians must think of their, safety in the context of their ability to deliver on this safety by themselves without the help of anybody else, because I'm not sure Russia or China will come to their aid.
Laith, we also wanted to ask you about Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Hungary. This past Wednesday, April 2nd, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban welcomed Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to Budapest. What's your reaction and analysis to this news?
Yes, and Hungary withdrew from the ICC. We are seeing also right now a statement from Belgium saying that they will not apply the ICC ruling. We already saw the Brits and the Americans say the same thing. And of course, we have the lawsuits and the threats from the US against the ICC and its judges and staff, and the sanctions that they put on them. So this is another nail in the coffin of international law and the international agencies that govern it since World War II, like the UN and ICC, ICJ, all of those things. These are right now taking their last breaths as international organizations. And to top it all, we heard the US and the UK say that the old system that's been in existence since World War II, openly saying the things that I've been telling you, basically, that this system cannot deliver on what they call security, international security. So, people can choose to continue to talk about international law and human rights and so forth, if that makes them feel better. and or, kind of cast a moral right on whatever we say when we're talking about anti-imperialism, decolonization, liberation. But is that relevant right now? Does international law exist? It does not exist currently. All these laws, they're unenforceable because the biggest violators of international law are the most powerful, or at least up until now, nobody has confronted them to a point of their willingness to reapply international laws on them. So we're in this chaotic moment, and only the force will make these Zionists and imperialists cease their violations of other nations' rights.
Thank you, Laith. Those were all the questions we had prepared for you today. But is there anything else you'd like to cover before we close?
No, thank you very much, Chris.
Laith, we just want to extend our deepest gratitude for you returning to the show. Of course, it is always amazing to hear your analysis. And I think, especially in the West, it's very just rare to hear someone speak so bluntly and truthfully and honestly about what is happening in the world, in the region, and in the world, and to humanity from every angle. So to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Please support support the incredibly important work, the courageous work that Laith and the other volunteer journalists are engaged in at Free Palestine TV by donating at freepalestine.video. And Laith, looking forward to speaking with you again soon.
See you soon, Chris.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.